Here with my co-host, Ola Souza. On this episode of Faith in Politics, we're going to be talking about police reform. And we're going to ask the question, how can a regular person just wade through all the confusion that's out there? We know that you've had a very exciting week with the 4th of July, and we'd like to thank all of those who are watching on Kahlo TV and listening on Key Light Radio. But of course, we don't want to forget all the people that are also watching on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you're watching, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. A few years ago, I broke my right wrist. The pain was a major issue, but the bigger issue was that it affected the hand that I use, which means the hand that I brush my hair with, brush my teeth with, drive with. You get the point. I had so much to do and my efforts were thwarted because I couldn't use my hand. As I was remembering this point in my life, I started to think about Jericho, and this is Joshua 6, 1 through 27. Commonly known as the oldest city in the world, Jericho is an important historical, cultural, and political center located northwest of the Dead Sea. The city is perhaps well known for the biblical story of the great Canaanite the great victory over the Canaanites. And you know what I'm talking about. This is marching around the city once every day for 6 days in silence. And then with a shout on the 7th day, the walls come tumbling down. Interestingly and noteworthy enough, the captain of the host was watching. And when Joshua went up to him and asked, "Whose side are you on?" the captain of the host said, "Neither. I'm here because I serve the Lord of God." My broken wrist, it didn't stop me from doing what I had to do. In fact, what it did is it made me reach outside myself to ask for help, something I don't normally like doing. And for 2 weeks, my life was like this because of the brokenness of my wrist. Today, we're not living in the same world as we did in our youth, no matter what our age is. Some older citizens, they don't even recognize their party. Even things simple as male and female have suddenly become discriminatory and forbidden. Police are the enemy, and Black people and white people are taught to look at each other with distrust. The system is broken, and there are those who relish the brokenness because they want to win, no matter the cost. At the prayer breakfast this year, Dr. Tony Evans reminded us that we are called to be umpires on the field, not on a specified team. As umpires, we rely on the one book to give us everything we need to provide stability, unity, and security to a world that is broken. That's our true north. As I mentioned earlier, broken doesn't mean useless or dead. It means looking for people out there that will march side by side with you and wait patiently for the day when the silence becomes a shout and victory is won. On that day, and I believe it is possible, the walls will come down and people of faith will take the city. And that's my thoughts for this week. Ola Souza, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me again. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you back because I know we had you briefly on the Mother's Day show. You were here for 10 minutes or so, and we got to hear about your motherhood and all of this great work you're doing with your son, Haku. So we say hello to Haku.
Who's in there?
Who's watching you, so proud of you. But the reason I wanted you back on the show today is because one of the big topics that's happening across the nation right now, all of the headlines, I don't care whether you're looking at CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, One News Network, whatever you're looking at, you're going to see police reform, police reform, police reform. And you came to mind because you have a history of working with the Honolulu Police Department. So why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers where you come from and why I thought to ask you on the show?
Well, sure. To be small, tiny technical correction. I have not technically worked with the Honolulu Police Department, although to rewind the clock all the way back to the very beginning, I was born into the Honolulu Police Department. My father, who has been gone now for more than 3 decades, was an assistant chief of police with the Honolulu Police Department. So to say that I bleed blue is a true statement.
And we're wearing blue today in honor of the police. Yes.
Haku has his Ohana blue shirt on today, too. Yeah, we're all dressed the part.
So all listeners and viewers, hopefully right now, if you're not wearing blue, put on some blue for the next week so you can, wear the blue.
Yes, absolutely. Back the blue, as they say.
Blue, yes.
Yeah, but that upbringing really sort of in between, I call it in between my two radio careers. I spent 5 years as the communications director / political action committee chair / lead lobbyist at the legislature for the police union, SHOPO. So that's where a lot of my involvement comes, not directly with the Honolulu Police Department, but actually the umbrella organization that represents the rank and file officers of all of our Hawaii County
And that
departments.
means that your smiling face was actually at the Hawaii State Capitol many a time on legislation that was moving through the Hawaii State Legislature. Any good stories?
Yeah, actually. There was it's a little bit of a departure from today's topic, so I don't want to take too much time away from that. But I distinctly remember that a bill was coursing through the legislature to eliminate the calculation of overtime from retirement benefits for our officers. And
we're going to tie that in.
Yeah.
And we will tie that in the show. So,
you know what? We certainly will.
So you go ahead and talk about this.
Yeah, actually, you're right. We do make a point here because some of the decisions that are being made at the Capitol today may have the same effect as what I cautioned. We'll mention them by name. Senators then Matt Matsunaga and Avery Chumbley. I was sitting in their offices and discussing the ramifications of this bill. And that's really what I'm here. I don't want to preach to the choir. I really firmly believe that you and I are with the majority. We represent the majority with respect. I am not of the opinion and will not be convinced that the media's narrative, police officers are bad and they're all corrupt, and that's not shared by the vast majority of people. So really what I endeavor to do here today is to tell those people who are of like mind with us that what the ramifications of what some of the media-driven narrative and some of the initiatives that course through the legislature, how that impacts not only our officers directly, but all of us as citizens of Hawaii. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Matt and Avery, talking about, we got to do this. And I said, you're going to create a vacuum. Mark my words, there will be a mass exodus of our police officers if you do that. Those who are eligible to retire will retire tomorrow. Those who are not eligible to retire will take all of our tax dollars that we have invested in their training, and our officers in Hawaii are heavily recruited because they are so well trained. They will laterally transfer to a jurisdiction on the mainland where they will make more money and lose no seniority, and we will you will decimate our police force if we do that.
And we want our listeners and our viewers to stay tuned, because when we come back later in the show, we're going to be talking specifically about the Hawaii Police Department and some of the things that you have found out. But we want to make it clear, right, that you are not employed by the Honolulu Police Department. So you're not here because you're getting a paycheck and you're trying to promote something. You're here today on this show because you believe passionately that there are good men and women that are part of the police department. And we also acknowledge right out of the gate that there are bad police officers as well. There are bad pastors. There are good pastors. There are bad doctors. There are good doctors. We talked on the show last week about one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch. I think that what's happening now is in the conversations that's happening across the nation is everything is generalized, right? So police are bad, which brings us to the term defund the police. Now, what's fascinating about that is when you look at all the headlines, it just depends on which headline you're reading. Right? Some, when they talk about defund the police, they mean just that. They're talking about taking money away from the police department. But there are other organizations that when they're putting information out, they're saying, no, we're not saying defund. We're saying reform. So One of my pet peeves right now, Ola, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this too, is the way that terminology now doesn't mean, it used to be in grammar. You remember in grammar school?
Yeah.
And full disclosure, Ola and I both are very Portuguese. Okay. And I promised our tech crew that I would only say that once. Okay. You're not going to ever get too many shows where you've got a Souza and an Andrade sharing a mic, because this is kind of scary, actually.
Stay tuned. There's going to be 3 more episodes of this because we have a lot to say.
A lot to say, Portuguese people we have. Okay, I'm sorry, that was 2. I'm done. I don't want any words in my ear. But anyway, one of my pet peeves is that when we were growing up in school and you took grammar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did your teacher not, with the red pen, mark off if you did not put the correct definition to a word?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, but today we fast forward and we're in a generation where words don't mean what they say they mean or used to mean. And, honestly, I don't know how kids can stay up with all of this new stuff that's happening out there.
Words mean what you want them to mean. Pick your own pronoun. They don't mean what they're supposed to mean. Only in the real world where most of us still live, they do.
Right. So, when we're talking about the news, this whole idea of defunding the police happened because of the death of George Floyd. Right. And suddenly everyone is looking at this and, people, we were talking about this at our Bible study this week, right? We were talking about, what we see when we're watching the news, when a shooting happens, right? We are only provided certain facts. Right? Even if they have the body cam on there, we don't have the whole story in there. The body cam doesn't show the person who witnessed it to begin with and made the call and all this kind of stuff, right? So we have to believe that the media is going to provide us accurate information. And then we see this and then we make our view on it. So in the George Floyd incident, people were horrified at what we saw, right? We saw a police officer with his knee pressing somebody's neck into the ground and somebody begging, for him to get off. I can't breathe. And I don't care who you are. That strikes your heart chord,
Sure.
right? Right. And then, of course, fast forward to all this discussion. Okay, well, obviously the police are doing something wrong. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. If I may, I kind of want to remind everybody about why the body camera is there in the first place. I think we get so caught up in the moment. And as you said, we get emotionally invested by what is being represented to us, which we then several months down the road find out is not, in fact, the full story. But I want people to remember why the body camera is there in the first place. Not meaning why do police officers wear body cameras these days, but that police officers are involved in these unfortunate incidents, no matter what they are. George Floyd, the incidents that we'll talk about closer to home here a little later on, because not by their own choice. They have a job to do, and they were summoned there. The only person who is there because of a conscious choice that they made is Mr. Floyd. And so I really, we will get back into defund the police and, share our thoughts about that. But if I could just start there, that's really what I want to say is please remember, police officers are not there by their choice. However, the unfortunate individuals who inevitably, in many cases, wind up being shot and killed, or however it is that they pass.
And we will continue that when we come back. But as many of you know, Faith in Politics is a viewer-supported program. So we're asking you to join with us, pray with us, support us, partner financially, and tell people about the program.
Hi, my name is Susan Duffy, and I'm the president of the Pearson Foundation of Hawaii, located in downtown Honolulu. We exist to provide pregnancy resources for those women who find themselves with a difficult or an unplanned pregnancy. For more information about us, please visit us at our website. We really look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
We have a mission here at Kalo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear. And today, we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my gosh.
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The kalo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Kalo TV aims to bring much-needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. I'm here with Ola Souza, and we're continuing our discussion on defund the police. So, Ola, what we can do right now, and I think that our viewers and our listeners will appreciate this, because we mentioned kind of earlier in the first quarter that people, they're going to just kind of get into this discussion based on what they know, right? Mm-hmm. And people are into talking points, right? Defund the police, bad. Defund the police, good, right? And then you and I were talking before the show started about how it's so important to have a conversation with somebody and drill down a little bit. Well, what does that mean? Right. When you say defund the police and you believe that that should happen, what does that actually mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that we find that the more the conversation is drilled down, the more we find out that people don't know as much as they think they know. And we're going to harp on this show until my dying breath. And that is stop using talking points. Yes. Talking points are great if you're getting paid, as when you were doing the communications for the police department, right? Mm-hmm. You got to get everything out in 30 seconds, right? You got to get the message. Mm-hmm. But we are talking about things that are going to affect police officers' lives. Right?
Absolutely.
So while our heart always goes out to victims of shootings, and they always will, we're pro-life people.
Absolutely.
So we don't want anybody to lose their life. And we want to make that really clear. But we also want to remember that every police officer has a family as well. Yeah. And so their life and their death also is important to us. And so, but I'm not going to get into the whole thing about Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, and all of that. All lives matter. Because yes, as people of faith, I'm going to fight for everyone's right to life. Yes. And so that's just where I'm coming from. But so what we'll do in this portion, Ola, is we'll talk about some of the myths.
Okay.
So this is coming from the left. Okay. So this is one of their articles, and I am getting this from brookings.edu. And so for those of you that are listening on YouTube, I'm going to post the link so you can go ahead and see that. Okay, so this is coming from them. Myth number 1, defund means abolish. Okay, so what they're saying is that it's a myth that defund means abolish. They're not saying that. They're saying that defund actually means just that. It means defund. So what they're saying is the truth is, quote, the movement seeks to demilitarize police departments and reallocate funding to trained mental health workers and social workers to reduce unnecessary violent encounters between police and citizens. So they're saying that's the truth of what defund means.
They're saying that's the truth today. You and I had a conversation actually yesterday as we warmed up a little bit and shaped this show today, where we said it's interesting that these talking points and the present narrative, these people don't seem to remember that what the statements that they made are recorded for all posterity. See, because when defund the police, as you said, which was really something that took off with George, in the wake of George Floyd. See, at that moment, defund the police in oh gosh, help me, where? Minneapolis. That's Minnesota. Minneapolis. defund the police meant abolish the police. That is what they wanted. That is what that mantra stood for in that moment. So to now, fast forward a year and some and go, oh, no, that's not what it means.
Well, again, the point that we're making is that when somebody says defund the police, they need to be defunded. Okay, we just mean that it means taking money from here and putting in here. First of all, let's be honest. I have no problem with them helping fund mental health services and all of this. They're important and they're necessary. In fact, here in the state of Hawaii, we know that there is a mental health crisis for homeless people, right? So we're not saying, that, okay, we don't care about that, because we actually do. But I don't know if kids today are learning this, but did you not learn how to balance a checkbook at some point in your life?
Absolutely.
Okay, people don't have checkbooks anymore. My daughter and I had this conversation. She goes, what do you need a checkbook for? And I'm like, to balance? And she's like, no, you just check your balance. And if there's money you spend, it's very weird. But anyway, you have money in, money goes out. You got to know how much money goes to this or that. And that's when you're talking about the police department. They have to pay the police.
Yes.
They have to, there are a lot of expenses, right?
Sure.
They've got to buy equipment, right? There's all kinds of things that go in there. So when you're talking about defunding, if you're taking money away, obviously something has to go away, right? So let's be clear that let's use the term the way that it means, right? The second myth they're saying is that defunding will lead to disorder, right? So they're saying that the misconception is that, right, that if you defund the police, that suddenly there's going to be chaos in wherever it is that this happens. But what they're claiming is that research shows, and I quote, that lack of education and illiteracy are some of the most significant predictors of future prison populations. So I'm like, wait, I think that what we're seeing right now across the nation is you have less police officers, less money going into the police department. I think that facts are showing that crime is rising.
2 words: Minneapolis, as you just mentioned, and Portland. 2 cities that actually went all in with this defund the police movement.
Did the president of the United States not just travel to one particular area that is seeing a huge increase in crime?
Yeah.
And did we not see that particular mayor on many a news channel decrying the funding of the police department?
Absolutely.
So I just have to go based on what I'm seeing, right? This is facts.
The people in Minneapolis, the city council of Minneapolis that actually abolish the police or, move forward with this defund the police effort are now clamoring to rehire police officers. What we saw in Portland is public safety is inherent to society. It just needs to exist. So what we saw in Chop Chaz, I'm not even sure what over in Portland, is when you demilitarized this zone, if you will, and said no police allowed here, what happened? They created their own system of policing each other because it's a necessary element of society.
And I think you bring up a good point, because that's the bottom line. I think people watch this and they're like, wait, I thought this was a good thing, right? No matter what society you are, you can even go back to the early days of this great nation, right? Native Americans, they had ways of guarding their own tribes. How about even back before then, right? All tribes had some form of governance to protect their citizens, because that's really what you said, right?
Absolutely.
People that live there want to feel safe. Yeah. And so there has to be some kind of rules there. And so no matter what happens, you're going to create this. But if there is overspending, then obviously I think that most people would say yes. If you're buying COA, you remember this? If you're buying COA benches and you're spending lots of money, look it up, people.
Go look it up.
Go look it up. If you're spending lots of money on extravagance, then yes, by all means, pay attention to what you're spending. But this is not what we're talking about, because what's happening is that they're hiring less police officers, right? That's how it's translating. So myth number 3, which goes to what you just said, police protect the public from violence. So they're saying that we need heavily funded police department because they protect their citizens, right? So this is what they're saying. In fact, quote, research has found that the police don't have a notoriously efficient track record of solving violent crime. Further, what the research does show is that 70% of robberies, 66% of rapes, 47% of aggravated assaults, and 38% of murders go unsolved each year, quote, end quote. So I'm like, wait a second. So basically what you're saying is that because all this crime happens, we don't need police because they're not doing it anyway?
My thoughts exactly. And again,
how about maybe they're underfunded?
Absolutely.
Maybe that's why they're not doing it. They're
Correct.
going on. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen the
Or
the
why
studies,
does this become a defund the police mantra? Why can't we just sit up and go, we have a crime problem? We don't have a police problem. We have a crime problem. The statistics meet that out.
Do you think part of the problem is because that things now, laws are becoming where it used to be black and white, right? Mm-hmm. Don't do this because this is going to be your punishment. But now they're going, well, we don't really want to punish you.
Yes.
And in fact, I remember having this conversation during COVID, right? Let's let prisoners out early, right? Because of, this COVID's happening and we don't want people to be stuck in the jails and getting it. So it's like, the conversations are happening on what makes it easy. And so if you start loosening your circumstances and your punishment, then people they're not going to be quite as afraid to not do it.
And later on, when we bring things closer to home, I want to talk about recruitment, retention of our officers, and also that retaliation factor, because it is this sort of loosening our grip on the ramifications of engaging in crime that lets people think, they push that envelope and it puts our officers in even greater danger.
So what do you say? Because this was a question, as I said, we were talking about this at our Bible study this week. And one of the members said, when you're on the show, ask Ola. It's so funny. Your name precedes you. Ask Ola, what she thinks about this where, and this is talked about. So let's be honest, where they protect their own. So how do we let the police department monitor itself when they do protect their own? So what is the answer to that?
That's a really difficult question. We're talking about the thin blue line, right? And prior to the thin blue line, police officers needing to step up for themselves and defend themselves under this constant onslaught of attack, which is what we define the thin blue line as now. Prior to that, the thin blue line was just that brotherhood wall and, we're going to take care of each other. We admitted up front that there's bad apples in every profession, in every walk of life. You mentioned even as pastors, we need to remember that under that badge beats the heart of a human being. And like you and me, we are all sinners, and everybody's going to make a mistake now and again. So, and I think it's unfortunate because here in Hawaii, we have this huge spotlight with respect to the Kealoha case where that actually did happen. And so it's a difficult position to defend right now, but to say that this isolated incident runs rampant throughout the department is a gross
misrepresentation. It really is.
Masterpiece.
Well, and it happens everywhere. Everybody protects each other. It's what happens. Teachers will protect other teachers. Sure. I mean, it's human nature. Yeah. And I think that's your reminder, is that we're talking about human beings, good and bad. Well, we want to hear from you, dear listeners. Tell us what you want us to talk about. If there's a specific topic you want us to address, then make sure you email me at eva@kalotv.com and we'll make it happen. Mahalo.
Aloha, this is William Harrison, president of the Christian Legal Society of Hawaii. We're having this amazing event. It's a free webinar. It's going to feature two distinguished professors of law, Jonathan Turley, as well as Michael McConnell. They will be speaking about religious freedom and First Amendment rights. We're going to be discussing some amazing cases that are before the U.S. Supreme Court that will affect your religious rights in our state. Please join us for this free event. Register online. We hope to see you there. Mahalo.
Aloha, Daniel and Lucy here with Kahlo Outreach. Lucy, tell them what's coming up.
Yes, so on the second Saturday of July, we are having a celebration. We are celebrating all of our volunteers that have come out to help us, and we are going to celebrate all that God has done. So if you have come out to help us in Waimanalo, please join us on the second Saturday in July for a great celebration. We'll have food, we'll have some entertainment, and if you have not had a chance to come out to help us, please join us so that you can come and see all that God has done.
We can't wait to see you there. Aloha.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. I'm your host, Eva Andrade, and I'm here with Ola Souza, and we are continuing our points about defunding the police and the myths, and there are 7 of them, and we are not going to be able to get to all 7. So what we'll do is put the link out there. You can look at it. But I do want to end on this before we transition into some of the stuff that's happening right here in the state of Hawaii, is I want to read you a quote from this article because I'd like to get your thoughts on it. So I'm reading directly from the article. I quote, "No matter what we choose to call it, defund the police, a reallocation of funding, or a total reimagination, research supports a public health approach to policing. If we are effective, funding public health approaches will reduce the reliance on law and order policing, save lives, and reverse the long-standing slide in the wrong direction." End quote. I know it's deep.
It is.
Soak it in. Soak that in, because this right here gives us the answer to all of the problems across our great nation.
I think what I just take such, is the correct word, umbrage, umbrage to it with that statement is that it just continues to fuel the narrative. We are imposing all of the ills of society and the poor choices on the part of these unfortunate people who commit crimes and lose their lives in the process. And we're making that a policing issue, that there's something wrong with the humanity of our officers, the training, the amount of money that we pour into them. I say rather than we invest in bring a mental health component to how we police society. I think this is an education problem. How are we training up future generations to make better choices? And I think the fact that this, as you alluded to earlier, releasing of criminals, we'll get into it in a little bit, bringing charges against 3 officers, people absorb this and they realize that there are no ramifications to crime.
You know, what has happened, I think, is that it's become a political issue. So instead of, like you said, looking to the root of whatever needs to happen, whether it's just reimagining, whether it's defunding, whether it's, getting rid of altogether, which, okay, I don't think, I don't know that anybody would say,
guns.
would be, I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, I think
another
that
show.
This is getting too, I mean, they're getting crazy in the sense of let's just, go all out for this. And that's what we're going to, it has become a political thing. And this has become a Democrat versus Republican thing. Yes. And it's sad because this is something that really needs to be looked at non-politically in the sense of, well, if you support it, then you're a Democrat. And if you oppose it, you're a Republican. I think that does a disservice to every single American, because this is a situation. People's lives are getting lost in these places where the crime has increased. Again, we need to weep for every life that's lost because of a gun violence or rape or domestic violence, all of this stuff that happens, the drugs that are coming into this country, all of this stuff is happening and we need to be dealing with this and not by whether you're wearing red or blue. I think It's very, very sad. So let's take a quick video on what's happening politically on how this has become political. So we'll play that video for you right now.
Just look at those Democrat cities where they actually did defund the police and crime has skyrocketed. Look, the Democrats own the defund the police movement. They have been the ones that have put in place anti-police policies that have led to our police having their hands tied. They've implemented the bail reform in New York. Nancy Pelosi tried to put it in the COVID relief package. And they are the ones, of course, that cut the budgets. If you look all across these cities, including New York, which cut 1/6 of the NYPD budget. The reality is that the Republicans are the ones on the side of law and order. We are the ones that are pushing for public safety. We are the ones that support our police. And unfortunately, they're trying to, weasel their way out of this, because if you just look at the polls in New York City alone, 3/4 want more cops on the street. They say public safety is the #1 issue in this Democratic primary that just passed. Yeah. So they have a public relations problem because they did this far left-wing experiment, and now it has failed. And people are dying. And in New York City, 97% of those individuals who are shooting victims, they are Black and Latino, and they know that they've failed these individuals, and so they have to turn the tide here. And look, they should join us. They should join us and actually look to refund the police. They should look to restore the plainclothes unit of the NYPD. Right. They should repeal the bail reform laws. And there's still time for them to join us and do the right thing.
What's interesting about that video is that they're showing how it has become so political, right? That now the Dems are saying that the Republicans also wanted to defund the police and all that sort of stuff. And I think that it's, again, doing such a great disservice. But now when we pull this into Hawaii, right, we always thought that Hawaii would be spared all the craziness. And in fact, if you're reading some of the news reports that are coming out, you've got some people in Hawaii saying we don't have a problem here because white people are the minority here in the state of Hawaii. It's really interesting. So you've got more brown-skinned people. But then on the other hand, you've got people saying, nope, we still have the problem here. And I know that you particularly have an issue with some statements that were made. So why don't you share?
Yeah, there was a podcast, a clip of a podcast that started, that surfaced back in April, where former prosecutor candidate Jackie Esser made statements, very bold statements, saying that we have a huge anti-Black sentiment here in Hawaii. And I was personally deeply offended by that.
Well, the University of Hawaii and Civil Beat also have provided research saying that it does exist here in Hawaii, and they've provided these studies to show that.
I had not intended to bring this up, but since we're enveloping what our lawmakers think, it just came to mind. Mayor Blangiardi recently nominated a retired police officer for a vacancy on the Honolulu Police Commission. That was ultimately withdrawn after he appeared before the city council and was asked one question by council member Kia'aina, which was, do you believe racism exists in Hawaii? And he answered honestly. And I personally will go on record as saying I share his opinion. He said no. And the entire council was aghast.
So they want somebody on the commission that believes
that racism
exists?
Yeah.
Okay. I always get people that email me or call me or stop me on this, and they go, racism does happen. Sure. Discrimination does happen.
Bad apples in the police department,
right.
Bad apples and discrimination happens. So it exists.
We are not painting with the broad brush.
No.
However, you don't want anybody on any commission that brings a certain, I don't want to say negativity, but actually is, right, to the position that would create a problem when there isn't a problem. Right. I mean, you read people's social media posts, going back to the fact that you saw this on a social media. And I saw this post, you shared it with me. But what I found more fascinating was the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments that were angry at this. Yes. And so, I have to be honest, full disclosure, I haven't looked at the University of Hawaii study that shows that racism does exist here. And I did read the Civil Beat story. But again, I can find if I'm going to write a story about something, I can look and find people that believe what I believe to write about it.
Here's the thing, and we're getting a little bit away. I really want to spend some time bringing this back to HPD, but while we're on the subject of racism, for so long we were known as, the state, the Aloha Spirit state, and the melting pot of our country. And you know what was beautiful about Hawaii then? Is Hawaii was great then. And suddenly we have individuals who are trying to paint us differently. And I think you really need to stand up against that.
You're not going to wear a hat that says "Make Hawaii Great."
Make Hawaii great again.
I feel like you're going to.
But you're right. You mentioned to me yesterday that you found an SMS study that was recently done that says, and I want to, while you look for that, I just want to deliver. I touched in with the Shopo Executive Director, Tanari Ma'afala, yesterday just to run some of my facts by him and tell him what I was about to discuss. And he asked me to do something. He wanted me to deliver a message, and he's certainly qualified to speak on behalf of our officers statewide. And he said, unlike Ms. he didn't insert this. This is me inserting here. Unlike Ms. Esser, who believes that Hawaii is racist, and several members on our council member were taken aback that a retired officer does not. And that the media-driven narrative wants to impress upon us that our police departments are corrupt. Our officers, and this is from Tanari, our police officers know that they are supported by the people, overwhelmingly supported. And on behalf of all of them, T just wanted me to make sure that I told our audience here today that they feel your aloha and they appreciate your aloha.
Oh, I know. And I've got several police officer friends, and, they were doing their coffee with a cop, right? And they were going out into the community, and that's all they were doing. They were at Starbucks, they'd have their cup of coffee, and they would and I many times would watch people in the community come up to these police officers. And I would say most of it was very positive, right? But I got to admit, there was a couple of times where they go, brah, and then they would kind of go off on them or whatever. But going back to the SMS poll, they have a community pulse survey that SMS does. And SMS, for those of you that don't know, is a community polling right here in Hawaii. And they've been in business a long time. And they asked several questions about policing in Hawaii. And I found it really interesting because they're asking questions specifically about trust in the police department and that sort of thing. And I will say that overwhelmingly, it seems like the people in the state of Hawaii trust the police department. There are people in this poll, and I'm going to post the link for those that want to actually look at the results in depth. What I found very interesting, though, is, and this is what I wanted to bring up, is that you can break down on the SMS poll, you can look for different things. And so I wanted to see if there was a difference between people 75 years and older and those younger. And let me tell you, huge difference. So just as an example, right? To what extent do you trust your local police department? 49% of those 75 and older said yes. But when I drilled down to the younger group, which is 18 to 34, only 14%.
Wow.
So there is a difference in age on how people view the police department. And are we not surprised, going back to what they're learning? Did you not say that earlier? What are they learning, right?
Correct.
What are they learning? So I know that it's really important that we talk a little bit about some of the situations that are happening here in Hawaii. There have been recently some police shootings, and it's really created an uproar here in the state. So I want to make sure that we dedicate some time to do that. But before we go into the break, I just love to get your thoughts on this difference between the older group and the younger group having trust in the police department.
Again, I mentioned it earlier when we talked about, the media keeps trying to make this there is fault within the police profession and within our police departments. With respect to this, we have to explore why the disparity between the states. It's an education problem. It is how we are training up. Where are they getting their education from? Is it being taught in schools? Is it critical race theory, which, I haven't even launched into here locally, but we know is running rampant across the mainland U.S. Is it the media-driven narrative? Where are they learning this? And how do we as the body counter that? Where do we get involved in training them up differently?
And we're going to continue that discussion. And I know that many of you in the community have asked how they can send a gift in the mail. And so I'm going to give you that address. It's P.O. Box 1256, Honolulu, Hawaii, 96807. Or you can call 808-596-4417. We'll be right back.
We have a mission here at Kalo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my God.
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The Kalo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Kalo TV aims to bring much needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Aloha, Daniel and Lucy here with Kalo Outreach. Lucy, tell them what's coming up.
Yes, so on the second Saturday of July, we are having a celebration. We are celebrating all of our volunteers that have come out to help us, and we are going to celebrate all that God has done. So if you have come out to help us in Waimanalo, please join us on the second Saturday in July for a great celebration. We'll have food, we'll have some entertainment, and if you have not had a chance to come out to help us, please join us so that you can come and see all that God has done.
We can't wait to see you there. Aloha.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. I'm your host, Eva Andrade. I'm here with Ola Souza. And as always, our time just always gets away from us. But Ola, I really want you to share what your heart is on some of this stuff that's happening right here in Hawaii.
Yeah. Let's get right to the chase. I have a bunch of notes here and we've only got a few minutes remaining. So let's just get right in. Top of mind for everybody are the 3 officers who have now been charged with either murder or second, attempted murder. And in spite of a grand jury's decision to not indict, not finding probable cause to indict, Prosecutor who Shopo actually endorsed in the last election.
You think they're having a little bit of regret there, Ola?
No. Like I said, I talked to Tanara yesterday, and I can tell you they are having more than just a little bit of a problem with that. But I want to. When I was the Shopo Communications Director, obviously I spoke on behalf of the police union. I was not in a position to speak on behalf of any of the individual departments. But what always frustrated me in these instances were, the command's blanket statement in the moment was always, well, it's an ongoing investigation, so we can't comment. And I went, no, you really can. There is a factual statement that you can make in the moment. People need to understand how we train our officers. We train our officers to stop the threat. If they are in a position where not only they are forced to draw their weapon, but actually make that split-second decision to pull a trigger, we train our officers to shoot to stop the threat. Understand, some of you, whether you've been to a range or not, you've seen targets. There is a reason why they only have a head and a torso on them. They don't have legs, right? I think President Biden has said in the past, shoot him in the leg. There's no leg on them.
How good of a shot would you have to be to shoot someone right in the right time where they would not bleed out and die?
Yeah, and die. Exactly. People can die through that. So I want people to understand, understand that recently and unfortunately, and this is where I've mentioned that how this whole narrative thwarts our efforts, especially here at home, to recruit, retain, and also stem retaliation. Recently, I remember SciCap's sister made in my opinion, terroristic threatening post saying, "Oh, so he has a family, he has a wife, he has kids too." And that that boldness again that we keep talking about is what people are seeing, and they are piggybacking on. There are, we are making and you have to put yourself in that officer's shoes in that moment, and any future officer who they know. Listen, those officers stood at attention less than a year and a half ago and watched the bodies of Tiff and KK pass by in their final review in front of the main station. There, but for the grace of God, go I. This is the impossible decision that we are asking our officers to make in a fraction of a second. And I just want people to remember that. And now on top of that, they have to consider, I could be brought up on murder charges if I do this. How does this all impact our ability to recruit new officers? It needs to be mentioned here because I know we're running out of time and there's so many points I want to make. Most people don't know. Our Honolulu Police Department currently has 300 vacancies. Over on the island of Kauai, whose entire police force is comprised of 121 people, they have 40 vacancies. I didn't do the math. My Kamehameha math is not that great. I'm not going to do it right now, but that is a tremendous shortage. So what I'm saying to people, because I know I don't want to preach to the choir and say, you got to defend the police, not defund the police. I think we're all of, like mind there, but it's my job here to sort of spell out the ramifications, not only what this means to the officers who have to suit up and go to work every day, but what does this ultimately mean to you and your family? How does your safety and the safety of your children or your parents come into play when we don't have adequate police protection out there? Because we simply can't recruit or retain police officers because of the ramifications of some of the decisions that they may be forced to make in a fraction of a second on the job. There's also another, and where does it end? Let's talk about those 3 officers. It has come to my attention, I'm not at liberty to share, but there is a now retired officer whose investigation has been reopened into a shooting that occurred several years ago, who may be also brought up on charges for how far back are we going to go? And again, how does that speak into the decisions of our potential recruits? How does that thwart our efforts to recruit for these 300 vacancies we presently have in Honolulu? And how does that affect our officers presently on the job in those situations? Because otherwise, like I said, it's really is a them or me situation. It's so easy for people to Monday morning quarterback. But you need to understand, much like I remember SciCap's sister said, "Oh, you have a wife, you have a kid." Yes, he does. And he wants to go home to them too. He wasn't in that situation by choice. He was brought there because of the actions of your brother. Is this too simple?
But I've always been of a simple mind in the sense of when somebody does a good job, you tell them they've done a good job and you congratulate them. Yeah. A pastor who gives a great sermon, you tell them they do a good job, because people are quick to tell them when they did not do a good job. Yeah. So if the police department does something bad, is this too simple to say they should be held accountable? Sure. If something is wrong and it is not dealt with the way it's supposed to, they should be held to higher standard because they do carry a weapon. Let's be honest about that, right? So I want to at least give the police department a shout out because they are making some changes, right?
Yes.
Recently, and this is according to, this is KHON did this, where the police department will be making some changes following the string of police shootings in 2021. So basically the changes include where shooting into a car, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to make some changes shooting into a car because of the situation recently, right? I think there were like 10 gunshot into the car or whatever. Mm-hmm. Interesting though, in the conversation we had this week, Ola, people were saying, but these are new police officers. They haven't really been on the beat a long time. So, even if they were trained, are they like not acting properly because maybe they're new? And I mean, how does that fit into this training that you talked about?
Again, I have worked in a capacity to represent the law enforcement profession here in Hawaii for a lot of years. In an effort to do that job better, I rode along. So, but that is not the same as saying I have walked a mile in those shoes. I cannot say that. I just want, I guess I don't want to be redundant and repeat myself, but I need people to understand before you throw that first stone, before you throw your stone, you have to sincerely ask yourself, what would I do in that situation?
So is body cams a good thing or a bad thing?
I think they're a good thing. You're catching me off guard. I have not pondered this question at all, so I'm just going to respond
do that at least once
from the
every show.
And go, you know what? I think they're a good thing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's the bottom line.
I think they should be. I think they should be used in. Yeah.
People. I mean, if you don't have body cam, do you not see this? Whenever there's any altercations happening now, you've got 22 cell phones.
Well,
out
and
there,
they come in
right?
after the fact, so the body cam shows us what preceded.
Yeah.
But here's my thing about body cams. I believe that they should be used in a court of law to if it comes to that as evidence in a case. I don't believe that they should be fodder for the media in the moment of the story.
Well, we want to make sure that we always continue this discussion. As always, we run out of time, but we know that this is an important topic and there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered. And we want to make sure that we come back to this. So Ola, I'm going to keep you on speed dial and maybe we'll have you back on the show.
Always fun to be here.
So don't forget tomorrow, July 11th from 4 to 7:30, Kalo Outreach is going to be having a open house celebration for the Waimanalo Outreach. And everyone is invited for ono food, music, kids activities, and more. Just go to kalooutreach.com for more information to register. As always, we want to thank K-Light Radio for the use of their studios, Hawaii Family Forum for the continued support, and Kalo TV, who puts their hearts and hands together to put this show on all the stations that broadcast and take this program throughout all of the Hawaiian Islands. So, and to all of you listeners for taking time to share your time with us. Ola, mahalo for your time and your mana'o.
Thank you for inviting me.
Mahalo, everybody. We'll see you next week. Jim Hochberg returns.